Hi, I'm Sandra and welcome to Create in Spain. Today I wanted to show you a purchase that I made recently because I think a lot of people are interested in airbrushes for various reasons. Now I have a much bigger kit than this, a much more expensive kit than this, but I wanted to try this one for some specialty usage basically, so that I could have an airbrush reserved for either makeup or for food use, something like that. One that was more easily portable than my larger compressor. So this is a very small compressor, it's very light, and it comes with an airbrush. This particular one was purchased from Amazon Spain. It was about 35 euros. You can get them for as cheap as about 17-18 pounds in the UK, and you'll be buying exactly the same thing. There's a lot of these around, a heck of a lot of them around, and they pretty much all come with the same airbrush. There are, I think, a couple that come with a dual action airbrush, which I'll explain in a minute, but most of them come with this one, which is a single action airbrush. The compressor puts out, this particular one puts out up to 25 psi. As a comparison, the compressor that I use normally, which is a more serious compressor, although it's still a small one, it's about shoebox size, that will put out about 45 to 50 psi. It comes with a plastic or rubber hose, whatever it is, and it's just a push on. So it pushes on to the airbrush and it pushes on to the base of the compressor. And then on the other side you have the connector for the power. It doesn't move around the desk when you use it, which is quite surprising. I thought it might, but it doesn't. It stays put. Now, the airbrush itself is cheap and cheerful. It is, as I said, a single action. What does that mean? Single action means that when you switch on the compressor, air comes out of the nozzle. When you pull back on the trigger, it then releases the colour that was in the cup, whatever that may be. The more you pull back the trigger, the more colour you're releasing at the time. And that is the only control that the airbrush has. The compressor has 3 speeds, so you can up the ante on the air just a little bit. I don't think there's a big difference, but there are 3 settings. And when you switch it on, this little button here has a light which glows either pink, blue or red to indicate which one that you have. So the airbrush itself is pretty standard, and if I take the back off, you can see the back of the needle and the needle chuck, and that just screws on and off. One little tip for you: before you use your airbrush, take the tiniest, and I mean the tiniest amount of Vaseline and put it around the threads. If you do that, you will find that your airbrush is a lot easier to take apart after a little while. And the same goes for the threads at the front here, underneath the nozzle caps, just a very, very tiny little smidge of Vaseline around there. Okay, now if you take the cap off, do yourself a favour and pull the needle in before you replace it, just so that you don't ding the needle. Okay, so the needle cap goes back on. If you don't cross thread it, which I was almost about to do, there we go. And you just put it on finger tight, don't over tighten it, and then let the trigger go. Your colour goes in this little cup, which this particular brush has got a nice small cup, which is really suitable for doing small things like card backgrounds, makeup, for doing airbrushing or food if you're not doing vast amounts. So it's really good for that size. But there is no further control on the airbrush. So I'm going to put a little colour in it and start it up so that you can see. Now make sure your hose isn't kinked, and put in some colour. Now you notice I'm using food colouring, and there's no reason why you can't use this on paper. It acts just the same as ink. Whether it's long-term lasting, I don't know, but most people don't keep these items for that long. So I'm just going to try and put one drop in. Ta-da! One drop. Okay. And I'm going to show you what it sprays like on the first speed. So here we go. Pull back. And the colour starts coming out. Now, I just run out of colour. Okay, switch that off. There we go. Now you can see, first off, I've got a little splodge here, and it was quite deliberate that I made a splodge, I hasten to add. And then further out here, there is slightly less colour. Now this is because the only way you have of controlling the spray, if you like, the direction of the spray, the area of spray, more like, is how close or how far away you are from the surface that you're spraying. The further away you are, the bigger the spray. Now you notice I've got white paper out here, and this is simply to protect my work surface, because airbrush by its nature does tend to produce a spray that goes a bit further than you might think. But that is the basic result from some spraying. Now you can see the dots. Now this is partly because of the airbrush and partly because of the compressor. The compressor is relatively low in power, and the airbrush itself has no great control over how much of the medium you're spraying. Now, if I show you a different one, first of all, just clean this out. And the way to clean it out is to rinse out the cup first of all, and put some more water. And this is just plain water, I'm not putting anything else in. Because I haven't got anything with any great sediment in here, I don't need to. Take that, and you can take a piece of paper towel, for example, hold it against the nozzle and pull back. And you can see that the contents bubble. Bubble, bubble, boiling trouble. And you can throw it out. You can get, switch that off, you can get little jars which have special tops on that you stick the pen in, or the stylus or air gun, whatever you like to call it. You stick that in the top, and then you spray everything out, and it's got special filters so that it stops all the mist and everything going into the room. So you can do that. But basically you can just rinse it out and shoot it until it's clean. So I'd put some more water through there, because this isn't my artwork, it's just paper. I'm just going to spray it out onto it. You see a little bit of colour coming out, but now it's coming through clean. Throw that in the bin and switch off. So that is the cheap and cheerful airbrush that comes with the compressor. And if all you want it for is a little bit of background spraying for cards, a little bit of stenciling, for example, it is perfectly adequate. If you want more control, or you want to do actual paintings, then you really do want a dual action airbrush. Now this one is my Iwata airbrush and I love it. It's very, very nice, but it's about 10 times the cost of the other one, so it should be nice. And this is a dual action airbrush. Now what do I mean by dual action? Simply that with this particular airbrush you have more control over the amount of medium that is sprayed. If I use this on a compressor, when I hook up the compressor, nothing will come out of the nozzle. Not air, not paint, nothing. I have to push down to release air and pull back to release colour. And this gives you far much more control. Again, at the back of the airbrush, I have a screw which I can tighten or loosen. And this allows either a small amount of movement on my trigger, or, if I open it up, a much larger amount of movement on my trigger. So that stops me from spraying too much paint. Now with something like this, you can draw very fine lines. I can paint eyelashes, for example, with this. Or you can, just let it go and paint with lots of paint. The choice is yours. You just have far more control. Okay. Now, if you're going to use an airbrush for makeup, I would still recommend a dual action airbrush if you are going to do something like your eyebrows and your eye makeup. This sort of thing is fine if you were going to use it for doing your foundation, your blush, not a problem. You might find it harder to use if you wanted to do your eyeshadow and your eyeliner. Okay, so bear that in mind if you're thinking of using it for that purpose. Pros and cons. This is cheap and cheerful and basically does what it says on the can. Whoops. But if you want something that is going to be more capable of doing more different things in the way of painting, if you want something which is more artistically usable, then you want something like a dual action. It doesn't, however, have to be something like an Iwata. You can get cheaper versions of dual action airbrushes from about £10–15, and for most people they will be perfectly alright. I just happen to really like the engineering on this, and it was a present, so I did have a nice one. This, in case you're wondering, is another valve. Because my normal compressor is on the floor, this allows me to adjust the air pressure to the airbrush without fiddling around under my desk. And I put this little connector on just to show you that if you have one that does not have a rubber or plastic hose connector like this, you can actually get these to convert one which is a normal screw-on one. You can get them to convert it to the simple plastic hose if that's what you actually want. Obviously the cup on this one is a lot bigger. What else can I say about airbrushes? The cup. Now this obviously has a bigger cup which is capable of holding a lot more colour, but for makeup you really only need the smaller variety. As indeed you probably would if you're doing decorating of things like cookies and sugar flowers and that sort of stuff. If you want to decorate full-size cakes, airbrush full-size cakes, you probably do want this size cup. The other thing to note is that not all airbrushes are gravity fed with the cup directly above the nozzle. Some are side fed. I don't like them. I don't like them because it takes quite a while for the colour to get through to the nozzle, and they're more difficult to clean out, so I'm not keen on them. And you can get ones which have either a cup or a jar that hangs underneath the airbrush, and I don't like those either. But that's just me. I don't need a lot of paint in one go, and I'm quite happy with the amount that I can use in here. And there is a cap that goes on top. And the other thing, I think that if you have something under here, I normally hold my airbrush like so, and it gets in the way. So again, I don't care for it. But it's depending on what you want to use it for. If you're doing a lot of model painting and things, quite a lot of people who do that do have jars that go underneath because they're using more paint. So yeah, there we go. That's what my new compressor looks like and my airbrush. Am I happy with my purchase? Yes, I am. It does exactly what I thought it was going to do. It is exactly what I thought it was. So yes, I'm perfectly happy, and it will just be an alternative for me to use if, for example, I want to transport it, if I want to take it down to the kitchen to do some sugar work or something, then it's a bit easier than it is taking my bigger compressor. The only other thing to note is that this is obviously designed for makeup and so on, so it's designed to have that kind of consistency put through it. It generally is the consistency of a milk. That's the nearest you get to it. If you are looking for something that is going to spray enamel paints, you're probably not going to want this, and you're probably not going to find that the air pressure is high enough to do it either. So if you're looking at it for that, don't bother. But for, you know, normal thin stuff such as food colouring or liquid watercolour inks, that sort of stuff, not a problem. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope that this has been useful for anyone contemplating airbrushing, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.